All right, welcome everyone to the Amery School District Board of Education meeting. We're reconvened in open session. We were in closed session earlier. The first matter on the agenda is the consent agenda items. Who had that this month?
I did, so I will make a motion to accept the consent agenda items. Yeah.
Before you do that, I do have one thing that needs to be corrected in the February 11th, 2020 meeting minutes.
Okay.
That the meeting was adjourned on a 4-0 vote, not a 5-0 vote. There was only 4 members present for that. So I will move to amend the minutes to a 4-0 vote.
I'll second that amendment.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The February board meeting minutes are amended. And now back to, Keith made a motion to approve the vouchers. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Is there anyone signed up for community comments?
Let's do an introduction too. We have an introduction
Oh.
of a new staff person.
I missed that. That's new.
It's okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
We have Fadia Sala here, middle school food service. So Fadia is here. You can come up and be recognized.
That's enough of that.
Be recognized. That's right.
Anything you want to tell us about yourself?
Oh, okay.
You'll have to come up if you're going to do that.
Okay.
You're on the spot, you guys.
So my name is Fadia Saleh. I'm from Palestine, not from. And I'm glad I'm here now. And we moved from last December. I don't have that much experience about schools, about everything, because I am new. So just I like to say I'm glad I'm here. Safe place, good schools, nice people, and I like to grow up here with my kids because I'm sure they have nice future here.
And you have 3 girls in the school district,
Yes,
right?
I have 1 in the middle school, 2 in the intermediate school.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Welcome
Thank you.
aboard. Thanks for coming tonight.
You can stay for the rest of the meeting if you want to, or you
can.
want to.
Okay. I'm boring, I'm gonna leave.
It's okay.
When she gets up and that door closes, y'all know you better pick it up a notch.
Okay, nobody signed up for community comments, so we will start with administrative reports.
Okay, we'll turn it over to the sparse audience over there. Josh, go ahead.
All right. I would just first start off by saying that the winter playoffs are approaching for our sports teams. It's getting to be that time of year, and we've got some fantastic things going on with our athletes, so be sure to pay attention to that. We're really excited. Our boys hockey team is seeded number 1 in our bracket with the split into 2 divisions for the first time ever for hockey, so we're really excited about that. Girls playoffs will be starting next Friday night in Barron. Our wrestlers advanced 6 wrestlers from regionals this weekend on to sectionals next week. Girls hockey team in our co-op will have a tough matchup with Hudson, but it's a team they've been competitive with this year. And then we still haven't done the boys seeding for boys basketball yet at this time. So aside from that, we had an awesome snow week a couple weeks ago. Turned into we kind of condensed a shorter week of activities into one day, and talk about a hit. The kids were awesome. It was a great time. Turned out really well. We had an inspirational speaker that week, Dave Reavers, who did a really nice job. We've been extremely busy with ACT test prep with our juniors. It's kind of the Super Bowl month for us when we have ACT Aspire coming up after that, so we've been doing a lot of preparation there. We had a very successful youth rec fair last Tuesday night. We had a full house of people. We just recently had the military ASVAB test, which is really important for our kids that are considering going into the military. And for future events, we've got parent-teacher conferences obviously going on tonight and Thursday night. We're about 2 weeks away from the ACT, which is on March 3rd. We have Youth Frontiers going on for our 10th graders that same day at Wappel. We've got our 9th graders are going to WITC for a field trip through WITC that day, so good opportunity for them. We also have what we call our Warrior Check, which was formerly called Teen Screen, where we do a mental health screening on our freshmen on March 10th and March 12th. So that's it from the high school.
Brad.
Wow, that's a lot, Josh. I don't have as much, but that, yeah. Medicaid annual cost report is complete. All right. I know that there's a few people that were involved in that, so I want to thank them. Andrew at the business office, Tracy Hemer, the Pupil Services Secretary, Tom Olson in transportation, all our staff and related service providers. They work hard in communicating information around that billing portion of what we can bill the state through a formula and then get reimbursed for medical services, attendant care, transportation is a really big one. All that information needs to be tracked and then kind of collated, put together, and submitted through the website called PCGS. And it's really kind of work that's all behind the scenes, but that over the second year that I've had the honor of helping out with that has been running more smoothly. So thank you, everyone involved in that. Training, we have select staff that will be attending a training at CISA 11 on content area instruction, co-teaching, collaboration, and differentiation. Happened to be at the high school earlier today and managed to sit in a couple groups, and that was on the agenda. Some of that work in terms of making sure that students are getting access to those essential standards, if not, where we want them to be, where can we meet them at where they are so that they can learn and access that instruction. And then last week we had our monthly district special education staff meeting where we reviewed some updates to OASIS, our data keeping system. Our occupational therapy team came and delivered some guidance to our staff, which was nice. There had been some questions. So it was good to have that communication. And then also upcoming, we've got our IEP workshop on the 27th. That's an opportunity for staff to come in, get some professional development hours, share some compliance things. If they're having difficulty piecing together a functional behavior assessment, they have the school psych sitting right next to them or a seasoned teacher to help them through that. And then finally, just we do have a few new staff in the special education department, 4 to be exact, and they're really taking advantage of the mentoring system that we have in place here at the School District of Amery. So I'd just like to thank Cheryl Meyer. She does a lot of supervising and organization of that, as well as Katie Elmer. Again, that's something that just kind of goes on behind the scenes sometimes, but it is a valuable system, and just want to acknowledge that and do what I can to support that, because I know that our staff really gain from it.
And you can see the reports from Mr. Benson, Ms. Schock, and Mrs. Meyer in the board book. They're all at conferences. They didn't just skip out. They're actually at conferences.
At the
I think
door.
Ms. Schock is outside the
Oh.
door, isn't she? Come on in.
Yes, okay.
Good timing, Ms. Schock.
Is it time to give your administrative report?
Do you want to say anything, or want us to just read it, what you submitted?
I don't think I have anything special to add to it. We just finished benchmark testing. We had a great turnout for conferences so far tonight. I think that's probably it.
Great. Well, thanks for popping in, even though you have conferences.
All right. Next would be the school nutrition report by Miss Stacy Nelson.
Hi, everybody. So this is my school year 18-19 report. So all of the numbers and information is from that, which is just important to say so you know what we're talking about. So over last school year, I had 14 staff members and we served 1,560 students. And of those students, I had 40% participation in breakfast and 65% participation for lunch. The last time I heard a national average for districts of participation, I want to say it was right around the 62%, so we're a little bit higher than the average, which I always at least want to goal for that. On the average daily basis, we serve 629 breakfasts and we serve about 1,000 lunches. And then those were our annual totals there at the bottom. So as far as the reports on that for our breakfast program, that's just kind of breaking it out as where those total numbers came from. The DPI report looks at the total meals based on free, reduced, and paid numbers. And then they look at the participation rate based off of those breakouts. So that's what this table shows for breakfast. And then we have the same table representing our lunch participation.
So, sorry, can I ask which of those percentages show, yeah, you said they were showing how much participated in that column?
Yep, it breaks it out by free, reduced, and paid.
Yep.
And then it's looking at the average daily participation. So and this column here is based off of our October claim.
Okay.
And then the percent is also from the October claim. So that's the percentage. And then the rate is divided by the students that are eligible in that category.
Okay. So it's like 61% or 72% of the free students who are eligible actually participated. Is that
So
correct?
this is the percent this is the participation rate.
Okay,
That is the average daily participation percent.
okay. Of the whole school then?
Yep, this is district-wide right now.
Right.
And then this breaks up our summer food service program. So the summer food service program is kind of tricky to kind of present just because of the way the fiscal year runs. So this is July of 18 and August of 18, and then June of 2019. So in July and August, we had one site operating, and this was our average daily attendance. And then I broke out the total breakfast and lunches that we served. And then in June of 2019, we served at 3 sites. We added the public library. So we kind of upped our numbers a little bit there. So the next slide. So that was really fun. I had one lady who would bring meals to the library, and we kind of tried to incorporate some nutrition education with it too. So we brought things, activities, and little nutrition handouts for them.
I'm coming to the library for lunch. That looked yummy.
I know. Yes.
Was that the first time you did the library? I don't think I've heard.
Yeah,
you know.
last summer I just decided to reach out to them and see what they thought to try and get a wider spread. And the director of the children department, her name is Erin, she was really receptive of trying it. So I have reached out to her for this summer, but with the kind of up in the air of what the outlook is for the library, she said she'd get back to me. But I did get contacted by the Y Camp here in town. They are also working with some other school members of trying to come up with some day programming options for our Amery students. So we'll be serving them meals too. So that's exciting. Then I decided to include this free and reduced rates. This is current as of January 31st. So because our summer program is free, there are rules and regulations of how we can provide that. So in 2016, we had a free and reduced percentage of 50% or higher, which then qualified us for 5 years. So this summer is our last year of qualifying for it. So it's just important to let everyone know that next summer we won't be able to offer free meals unless our percentages go up above the 50% again.
And that's district-wide percentage?
Elementary school, so, so right now the elementary is at 46%. So it is close, but not close enough, and we can't round up either, so it has to be 50 or higher.
And they look at that number after this school year, or when you said summer?
I've been tracking it every month, just because I knew that it's coming to an end and different grants need specific dates of what percentage we were at, so we've been tracking it every month and we haven't hit it yet, so we have next school year to hopefully get it, but if we don't get it in time, then I just want people to maybe start talking and come up with plans is the goal. Yeah. So this is a summary of our 18-19 totals for starting the school year as the beginning fund balance, and then our revenues and expenditures, and then the ending fund balance.
So Stacy, there's a $10,000 difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that from unpaid balances, or is it just we're not charging enough to break even there, or what's going on?
We
with
purchased
that?
equipment through this last year that if we didn't purchase that equipment, it would have been a positive addition to the fund balance. What did we all get? Some tables, and what all did we purchase this last year?
We got the new serving lines at the high
Yeah.
school, and then was the elementary dish machine on
Yep.
this fiscal year too.
Yeah, and that comes out of that. Expenses coming out of that. So
Okay.
Because
so-
normally
Yeah.
you'd be positive like 20 or 30,000.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
kind of what the trend has been?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's been
Yeah,
even
that's
more than
okay.
that.
Why?
yeah, you're more than that last year. So yeah. It's just that it's a good time to purchase these things. That's probably the reason to have a fund balance when something happens. And
Are we capped at a fund balance that we need to stay under there, or no? Yes? No?
the state has guidelines. They don't want to see a huge fund balance, but you also want to be able to have a fund balance enough if something happens to your equipment that you can replace it. So
Yes,
yeah.
there are guidelines, but not anything concrete.
no, there's nothing concrete that says you have to have X percentage of a fund balance for your food service that I've seen.
So I always like to mention the PLE tool too when I'm here. Last year we were able to get an exemption based off of our positive fund balance on December 31st. As of right now, state DPI hasn't released any information on it, but I was able to find that the USDA did release they released a statement saying that they would allow exemptions again for those school food authorities that had a positive balance. And so I made a chart just kind of for my own knowledge too, and to help all of you. That's historically what our balance was as of December 31st. So, I mean, it's been going up. So as far as if we should raise prices, I'm not 100% sure yet, but the trend is showing that we should be okay based off of the information I have so far.
And our cost for food and supplies, is that staying pretty constant then, or?
Our food costs have gone up, and that is based off of me trying to get better quality. So that is going up. I feel like, and I mentioned it last year too, I feel like if we raise meal prices, I think it's gonna, like, I don't know that that would benefit the program.
Yeah, the reason I ask is so we see that this trend of this balance going up, and so if you're also spending more on food, that would tell us that we probably don't need to raise prices, that you're still getting good quality with, and balance is going up still, so that's why I'm at, that's the only reason I was asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, I need to thank the people that help me every day make the meals happen. So these are my 18-19 teams.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
For all your work.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, Next on the agenda is the Student Engagement Strategic Plan update by Ms. Weisenbeck and Mr. Baumgartner.
Thank you, and I think what's now at least a second-year tradition, I will deliver the strategic plan here, and Kate will be back there for questions or backup as I go along here. I think that's. There you go. Then you're welcome at any time. I'm sure you're just waiting to get up here. So really, this is about not a wholesale new initiative, new plan. This is really just an update and to let you know where we've been, what, and where we're going with this. So you're going to see some changes in it, but you're going to see a lot of familiar things. All right, so we can move on to the next one, Becky. First, just the team. A lot of support goes into this. Of course, it takes a team and really a district-wide team. This is the Pupil Services vertical team. They've done a lot of the implementation, planning, organization of not just this presentation, but a lot of the supports and curriculum and activities that you're going to see sprinkled throughout here. Also, not on here, Mike Kelly, our at-risk teacher at the high school, again, is a real credit to some of the work that's happening here, as well as our PBIS building level teams. That's really how the work, where those instructors in those schools, led by the principals, that's really the work bubbling up and what are the needs. You've got those things going on. You want to make sure that this stuff is relevant to the curriculum and to the activities that are happening, the students and staff in schools. And so they're a really important part of this. And there's also credit to the PLC model, and that's what we all are looking to do, is to really make a problem-solving team, identify the problems, and then go to work solving them. So here we have what you may have seen before, but this is just kind of a reminder that there's a lot of different initiatives, activities here that come into play at work. And I'll just go through some of these programs really quickly. You're going to recognize a lot of them. I would point you back in your board agendas to the November presentation on character education and anti-bullying, because there's a lot of these that you're going to see. For example, in social emotional learning supports, we're starting to implement second step, and eventually you'll see this move K through 8. Zones of regulation, big deals, little deals. This is SEL, peer tutoring, kindness club. PBIS, Swiss data, we now have an ability to track and make database decisions around school-wide behaviors, and then couple that with proactive teaching in those areas that we're seeing problems. We've got warrior time lessons, warrior way school-wide expectations, got implementing stop and think rooms where students can have some time to decompress, to get some positive feedback throughout their day. And then also check in, check out, which now is really K through 12. In just the last couple of years, we've seen that expand more in the middle school and high school as well. And the trauma-sensitive practices, the ongoing professional development. We've had in-service presentation with Dr. Jim Harris, teaching on protective behaviors down at the elementary school, sexual assault training hosted by the Amery Police Department, suicide prevention training like question, persuade, refer, and repair conversations that are happening and build between students and also between staff, being facilitated with our students' success coordinators often. Safety and wellness, of course, there's an overlap there. We have crisis teams and procedures, staff wellness day, SAM presentations around cyberbullying at the middle school, and school safety grant training, CPI training, goes on and on. Relevance to curriculum, PLCs, standard-based training, and an SEL framework. And finally, what is it all about? It's about climate, right? How do we create our district's climate so that it's somewhere where we have the best, they want to stay, and those who aren't here want to join us in our initiatives. So with that, we'll just move into our updated plan here. So the overall committee goal, which has not changed, will improve the learning environment for all students in order to increase engagement, both social, emotionally, and academically. So out of those, the 3 objectives: increase belongingness and engagement. We want to reduce at-risk factors. And number 3, increase academic growth. And it's all about closing gaps. Go on to the next one here. So you'll notice there's some past tense language in here, and those are things that really we have accomplished. And instead of letting those drop off completely, we want to keep them on so that we can show that they're ongoing. Just because we've implemented youth risk behavior surveys doesn't mean we do it 1 year and stop doing it. We use that to inform all our work moving forward. So again, you'll see the strengthening the relationships between students and staff, check in, check out, that has increased. I can say that as an outside observer, having come into this district only a couple years ago, that was an intervention definitely there, but the training and the use is just more robust this year than it has been in the past. The stop and think intervention we have now at the elementary school and now the middle school in the camp room. And there's also that sort of thinking happening even at the high school level. We don't have a classroom there, but there's definitely a how do we help students to make it through the day, to proactively give them a place that they can re-engage when they're not ready to learn. Implementing positive behavior interventions and supports. Again, the second step curriculum that we're seeking to push K through 8. I believe it's the 6th grade has been delivered. Most of those lessons, and then some of the lessons have been delivered to 7th and 8th graders. That will continue on through the next year. And then, of course, the Swiss behavior data system and the decision making that's happening with that. Finally, just in trauma-sensitive schools, this addressing hardships and paying more attention to students that may have social emotional learning needs. And that's really happened through our PDH opportunities and in-service, which I think it's really important that our support staff has been included in a lot of that. I think it's a great thing. All right, number 2, again, past tense language here. We have developed a system of tracking, which includes data review teams. That's really the pupil services building teams that are reviewing that data and then communicating it out so that they can match students that have needs for intervention to ways to help them out. And then finally here, we've got a couple new ones. You are definitely in the loop on that because you've seen some of the policy change and the practices with respect to the attendance data and trying to address chronic absenteeism in the school district. So that is new for this year onto this agenda or onto this plan. And then finally, establishing a communication structure to share some of these practices and goals. We definitely are doing the work and teams have been formed. It's all about the next step is how does one team know what the other is doing? How does Lena Elementary relate to the work of what's happening at the middle school and vice versa so that we can align some of the goals and perhaps do things more efficiently. And finally, number 3, increasing academic achievement, closing gaps, so focusing on academics. Again, not new, just developing systems to increase co-teaching and really any sort of tool or staffing model that allows kids that struggle in regular education to remain in regular education. One thing that evidence tells us is that the more you're pulled out of a regular education class, overall, the less you're going to learn. All right, that certainly isn't due to anyone not trying to get you there, but that inclusion to the regular core curriculum really matters a lot. Finally, in evaluating building schedules, we've just got some schedule changes set for the middle school. Again, just another area to evaluate use of supported teaching and co-teaching and some of those what I need, win times. and make recommendations for improvement. And a new one down here, moving from evaluating data sharing practices, that's what was on the last student engagement plan. And here, really, we've done that work in kind of seeing where we are with, what data we need to look at. Now it's, how do we share it? So we're looking at grade level transition planning and the training there, as well as, assessment data and how we can better share the data that we have, whether it's Star Reading or Ames Web. That's all information that's there, but if it doesn't move from one individual to another or another building, it's not as valuable as it could be. So back to the umbrella, maybe in year 3, 4, or 5, I'll be able to save you all time. I'll just get the umbrella tattooed on my shoulder, turn to you and explain it to you there. But the most exciting part of this work is this, that it's all staff, right? As People Services Director, and I think Kate would feel the same way, the exciting thing about this work and why back to the umbrella is you get to share this work with every person that you run across in the school district, whether it's a bus driver, custodian, Dr. Derfler, support staff. So that's why it's valuable work to me, is not just the work itself, but the relationships and the shared learning that everyone has for it. So, any questions?
Yes. On the last slide, you covered developing an improved system to support teachers in the core classes and how you're trying to get kids more time there. Can you tell me specific instances that what you've done in order to do that? I mean, I think these are a lot of the same kind of stuff that we talked about in November.
Mm-hmm.
That was things that we're going to do. So what have we been able to do since November to now?
Well, from, one thing is always looking at, we've got a Read 180 curriculum, for example, so a kind of replacement or an intervention English language program. We've had that for special ed in the past. We've had a co-taught class now at the high school for students that may need that support, either kids that are already at the high school, you're identified as a 10th grader, you're going to have a really tough time moving through the curriculum if you don't get some reading intervention support. Or maybe that you're coming from 8th grade and you've been in Read 180 for 1 year, you may not be ready to move on. In the past, it was a special ed only curriculum, meaning that you needed an IEP to be in that class. One of the things they're working on is having conversations, looking at data, trying to find out how can we rearrange staffing, support, and resources to make sure that you're getting that academic intervention not just by virtue of having an IEP, but just because you need it.
So the supportive math at the middle school right now that we're looking at expanding on, Jess Smith program.
Right. So in the middle school, we've got a lot of teachers, special ed staff that are moving in, supporting students in a general ed class. In the past, that may have been viewed sort of, you're there to support students with IEPs. But we want to move toward the land where you're there to support every student in that classroom. Because the kids that we're focused on closing gaps and that have difficulty in terms of reaching that academic achievement, they're not just kids with IEPs. They're kids, all kids. There's a lot of students that need that extra support. So always it's that question around how do you arrange your resources in a way that you can serve the students that are eligible through a compliance aspect, but also reach the kids that need the support.
And we're doing that. We're making active changes, obviously, to do that then. So extra help with math there.
We're looking at trying to build things into the schedule next year. The approach that we've taken is you got to start small and work yourself in rather than dive in with a bunch of initiatives at one time. So we've targeted some potential areas at the high school for next year, and I don't know if there's more growth at the middle school or not.
Mm-hmm. So that Read 180 co-teach, for example, we ran that this year, looking at the data and how many students need it. at this point, it's looking like we don't need 2 teachers in that classroom. However, it's still, if we come around to fall and have move-ins and have, see that there's a need, there's an option to looking now to, looking at your staff and saying, you know what, we're going to need to expand a section, or we're going to need to make this co-taught. I don't see this really as something, in order to make progress, that you have to have it here and it has to stay there forever. That sometimes doesn't fit a wise model of staffing, because you got to serve the students that you have, and the student population changes. However, when you do move to co-teaching or supported teaching, what it does is it builds the capacity of your staff, and it might be a big change one year. It's the first time I've ever done this. I'm going to need to hone new skills, develop new relationships, and even if I don't do it the next semester, you know what? Now I have that in my pocket. I've built some skills, and if Mr. Gould and asked me to do some supported teaching or co-teach, it's not just this nebulous thing out in the horizon. I have a skill set now, and I've built some relationships to be able to do it. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next section on the agenda are the informational items, starting with the legislative update.
All right, we have 3 items that are making their way through this state legislature. An item that really relates to the work that we do here in schools is the notion of retired teachers coming back and being in the classroom. We have a variety of folks that have wanted to do that. The unfortunate reality is state law doesn't really allow them to do that as smoothly as we would like. And here's what I mean by that. They need a severance of 75 days from their last day here until they begin working here, in 75 days from June 30th puts you right smack dab in the middle of September. And that's not when we need them. We need them at the beginning of September. So the item on the table is to reduce that number from 75 to 45 so they could be ready to do that. There's been resistance on that, and if you haven't noticed, things have gotten a little political in our world, and that's happening right now in Madison on that one. The second item is the notion of testing for lead in schools. They have tabled that, so they're not going to be doing that. There was a big push on that about 3 or 4 months ago, and they have chosen not to pursue that. And ultimately, the reason is they found it to be isolated instances. Rather than put everybody through the process, they wanted to just focus on those who have identified issues. And the third item is, it's new, but it's picking up steam in a rather big hurry, and it has to do with athletics. Students that are part of virtual charter programs, which in essence means that you are on a virtual schooling outfit. Say, for instance, a student lived here in Amery and virtual schooled with Name Your Virtual School, and there are thousands of different options. They can continue to virtual school, but they would still be eligible to participate in athletics in your district. It sort of mirrors the law that surrounds homeschoolers being able to participate in athletics, even though they're not part of our academic setting. And there is a lot of resistance to that, because the way the law is written is it will force in essence, force the WIAA to implement that. And the WIAA every turn has said absolutely not. And pretty much every other group that has a say also has said absolutely not. But it's still making its way. If I had to guess, I would imagine that we could be looking at a situation where virtual school students would be eligible for athletics. So, not sure if you have any questions about any of those 3, but those are all presently happening down in Madison.
I didn't know that they couldn't.
They could
like
not.
Homeschoolers can, but
The homeschoolers can. How long ago was it, Mr. Gould? 3, 4 years ago?
4.
4. So 4 years ago they made that change, and this sort of is the next step in some people's eyes on that process.
Do we feel that with the allowance of being able to participate in athletics and be virtual school, that we would lose kids from our physical school buildings to virtual school? And
I don't think there would be a tremendous amount of kids, if any.
Why is the WIA opposing this? Do you know?
Because in some areas it would be a lot of kids. Because the push on this is coming from the Milwaukee area, and you're talking school settings at the high school that have some 15, 17, 1,800 students, and you're talking about academic franchises that mean a lot and athletic franchises that mean just as much as in their success on the field. We don't have that many virtual school kids for it to matter, but it does matter in those settings. And I'm not sure if you wanted to say anything, Josh.
Well, I would imagine you're probably talking at a school our size, 1, 2, 3 kids a year, which is approximately what it's been with the homeschool rule since that has changed.
All right, moving on to buildings and grounds update.
Okay, last week, Tuesday, 4 of the 5 board members joined George and I. George Sigsworth, that is, he's our buildings guy, and Troy Miller of LHB Architects, and did, in essence, what was, I called it a building and grounds tour. So we spent about an hour or so in each of the 4 buildings. And the purpose of this task was to identify our deferred maintenance needs and further talk about things that had already been done and what the progress on those already finished products was. For instance, we did the middle school roof project and the elementary project this past year. And also to talk about some of the rather serious needs that we have in particular the high school and the elementary school that simply don't fit into your regular budgets. The high school was built in 1976 with additions in 92 and 97, and the elementary school was built in 1967. So they are fairly old in terms of school life. And at the end of the evening, we had a pretty good conversation about how we felt about what we saw. And we want to be entirely transparent with all of you. So this is an opportunity, really a first opportunity for the board to speak to what their experiences were on that day. Aaron, Shar, and Keith were with us on that day. And I'm going to turn it over to all of you. And if George wants to chime in, come on up. You can ask George really hard questions if you want to. He's ready for that. He said he was just coming here with his pretty face. And I said, it'll take more than that, George. So.
Yeah, I'd like to say I thank you for the opportunity to do that. That's in my wheelhouse. I enjoy the show and tell part of that. Unfortunately, as buildings age, obviously we have to bring that to you. It gets harder and harder. I can say a lot of the equipment we have is beyond its life expectancy, but just fun to show you. And you got to see some boiler rooms, no roofs.
We didn't go out on the roof at nighttime.
I'm afraid you might lose another board member.
You may.
We'll make it pushed off, slip it off. You never know.
So if there's any gleaming questions in the back of your mind from that night, I'd be happy to.
Well, the only thing that ever rolled around my head was, the awareness. And we're aware now, but how do we get our constituents to be aware? And,
Right.
and maybe there's a virtual tour we could do, or even open up physical tours to people, because that seems to be the best way for people to see the needs that we have with our buildings.
So here's the plan that's presently in place. In March, George and I are going to present to you what was done building and grounds wise in 2018-19, which is last year, and then what was done this year, 19-20, and the stuff going all the way up into the summertime. Then the items that are scheduled for after July 1 of 2020, because that moves into your next budget year. The stuff that's planned for 2021 and the stuff that's planned for 21-22. So you're going to see that list, and what that list in essence is from money that we had in our budgets, and further from money that was a result of the April 2017 referendum. We want to make sure that folks understand that that money wasn't just sent into the general fund and was spent on the electric bill. It was spent, as it was earmarked to be done, on building and grounds projects. And then you're going to see a category of information that's straight from last Tuesday. Stuff that simply doesn't fit in the budget. When you talk HVAC at the high school for a 1976 building, the high school was built for $3.29 million 43 years ago. You couldn't do HVAC in the high school for $3.29 million, just the HVAC.
Just the HVAC.
So that's just one item. We have to come up with a manner by which to share that with all of you, and then to do exactly what Keith just said. We're going to invite the public in to see exactly what's going on. And you're going to help us decide what to do. It isn't our decision, but rather yours. It's your dollars that we're using, in essence, to address some of these issues potentially. So that'll happen over the course of the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I would agree with Keith that I think as parents, as community members, we come into school and we aren't allowed access, or we have no reason to access certain parts of those buildings. A lot of classrooms, things of that nature. I mean, we come into the auditorium, we come into the gymnasium, things that are, you know, structurally in very good shape. We don't realize the background noises, the heating problems. I know several times I've been into the high school this year with Joe bringing them late, and the building is 20 different temperatures. We've either got teachers who are sweating bullets or freezing to death. So to have the tour was really eye-opening. It was really made us aware of things that being good homeowners that you would be cognizant of in your own home. That, you know, that if we don't upkeep the things, your homes are going to fall apart, and our schools are very much the same way. You know, most of our buildings are in very good shape structurally, and those things that we looked at was, you know, some things that are great. Some things, the things that are bad are really bad and need to be replaced. And I think there'll be opportunities maybe for the Free Press to come in and have some pictures and things, tours, write up some articles in the paper.
The public will be invited in beginning at the end of summer into the early fall to be able to see. We can come every single time we have a tour if you'd like.
We and it was an open session, and so you know, anybody could have, you know, come into that just as a public, just as we are sitting here now. If we do another tour, I would invite more people to come in.
Anyone that wants to come.
Take a look at those things. And I really wanted to say that I had an appreciation for George before. I have a huger appreciation for what you do on a daily basis to know every nook and cranny of every building in this school district, and to know what's going on a it's a phenomenal a skill set that totally escapes me. But I am greatly appreciative of the job that you do. And my favorite part of the tour was that we got to see where your favorite office was, that your little hiding spot. I won't disclose it, but it was my favorite part of the tour.
And I'll even double down on that his ability to stretch taxpayers' dollars to make the facilities that people see look the way they do is outstanding. And like I said, it's really getting to the point of seeing the things that you don't see that need to be addressed. But I think he does do an out job and saves the district a lot of money with how well he handles the buildings. So definitely.
Yeah. I know you didn't come to have your praises sung tonight, but
truly, I made it worth it.
blown away by
Can't wait
your
for
knowledge.
next month.
That's when the rubber hits the road. That's right.
Glad you're doing vouchers next month.
There are some mystifying experiences that occur in the elementary and the high school particularly. There are things there that I'm still trying to figure out as to how that decision was made. Yeah. I remember when George and I went through the building with LHB and the mechanical engineer and electrical engineer and a general contractor about 3 months or so ago now. And we were in tech ed, and the mechanical engineer stared at the same piece of equipment that attached to the ceiling for 10 straight minutes. And at the end of the 10 minutes said, I have no idea what that does. And if they don't know, I don't know. So we got some issues.
Yep.
Any other questions for George or for myself?
You were really knowledgeable then. I think a lot of the questions that we asked on the tour, and probably things that we can't remember. We didn't bring our clipboards to write things down, but I know you guys are planning on having a packet distributed to us with all the things that we went over. So I don't have any questions.
You'll have it in your
You
hands in
answered
March.
Them in detail while we went on the tour. The gentleman that came with from the architectural company was amazing too. He had a lot of good insight, good information, very knowledgeable. I felt very comfortable with him being on that tour with you, and I'm super appreciative of the time that you spent with us. Thank you.
No problem. I enjoy it. That's what I live every day, right down to what I have of the number of heat pumps that I deal with on a day in and day out basis. There's the nuts and bolts behind the concrete walls is expansive. The miles of wiring and plumbing and HVAC equipment it's crazy. And as fact of the matter, probably since I've been up here, there probably are 2 or 3 things that have broke in that amount of time.
Let's hope not.
That's just the way it is.
It sounds like farming.
Yep, so, anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, George.
Okay, the last item on the informational item list is the Wisconsin Association of School Boards Convention recap.
End of January, Aaron, Andy, George, Chelsea, and myself went to Milwaukee for the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. It's the sort of the epicenter of education for 3 or 4 days there. Probably the biggest drawback of going is it's a 5-hour trip, and it's only so exciting to be on 94 for 5 straight hours, even in a luxurious new white van, which was quite a trip.
That van is awesome, yeah.
It was
I'm
awesome.
envious that I didn't go now.
When you get an east-west wind, when you get a high vehicle, believe me, you feel it. It was quite a trip. So I'm not sure if Aaron or Chelsea wanted to speak to any of their experiences. The 2 sectionals that stick out for me was referendum stuff. There are a lot of districts that are trying to talk to you about how to do referendum. And the other is all sorts of alternative compensation models that are being entertained by districts, and some people are doing some really creative stuff. So that's what stuck out to me. Aaron, Chelsea, or Andy?
Yeah, overall, it was really informational, and it was neat to hear different ideas. I went to a session on Phi-Ed and how Phi-Ed is a great place for social emotional learning, and that interaction with the students interacting with each other, and just the importance of Phi-Ed. So that was a great session. I also really enjoyed one about student participation and student councils, and even having student representation at our board meetings, and that's something that I brought up even this last fall, and so we're discussing that idea and looking into other school districts and how they do that. But I really liked, there was just a lot of ideas around student council and around students, giving students a voice and representation. So those are 2 that stuck out to me, as well as one of the general sessions about making learning meaningful and engaging students, and even how, when you go into the real world, you don't have English for an hour and history for an hour and science for an hour. You are combining all of those things, and so how doing some kinds of projects, I mean, he just gave several different ideas that schools were doing or kids were working on, creating something, inventing something, or, presenting something where you're learning all of those skills, kind of some of the things we do for Genius Hour and those kinds of things, but where you're combining those skills together, and that can be really engaging and important for students.
I also attended several sessions a day. I'll just hit on a few. I attended ones that were, I guess, ones that impact school boards and administrators. One of them was the summary of the 1920 legislative session, and I think Sean has been updating us on a monthly basis of the legislative update, and it just had a lot of really, interesting recaps of the legislative session and some bills that were in front of the legislature, such as there's a bunch of bills on dyslexia, the new tobacco law, which makes it, I guess you have to be 21 to purchase tobacco products now. You can't be 18. You touched on the return to work bill about retirement. There's also talk about raising the actual retirement age. Cursive writing in elementary schools, I just thought that was really interesting. Basically, they said not to expect any bills to pass that have a fiscal impact this year. Another session I attended was on policy development and different approaches to drafting policy. As a matter of fact, they kind of started out the session with, we should have a policy on drafting policy. And the difference between policies and administrative rules. What I got the most out of that session is it confirmed what we are doing now is what we are supposed to be doing, which is updating policies. You've been really good about updating policies. I mean, laws change, policies need to change. This has not been done, evidenced by the fact that we are now updating policies from the 90s. They should be from 5 years ago, not 20 years ago. Anyway, that was another interesting one. And then I also attended several sessions on school law. It's interesting now with, I guess the one thing I just want to touch on is the CBD. I mean, we see that everywhere. We see that at Quick Trip. They sell it at Indigo Iris. They sell it everywhere. And a lot of schools are implementing policies on CBD for employees, students, possession on school grounds. The law is really vague right now. It could be interpreted to be illegal unless you have a medical prescription for it. And so I see that coming, in the future, is to have a policy on that for use on school grounds by staff and or students.
And I'm
So-
assuming, Chelsea, that's just because there's no guarantee of the THC content in the CBD, right?
Correct, and you can actually test positive.
Yes.
And that could be a concern for like school bus drivers. I mean, I've heard, people use it for like the lotions for pain, and I mean, there's I don't know, it seems like it's being marketed as a cure-all. I mean, I don't know, but it's everywhere. I mean, and so I see that coming into play as a policy that will be written as soon as the law is figured out a little bit more, because I know the law is still
Because it's not regulated by the
developing.
FDA.
Yes,
It's,
it actually, they did take it off the controlled substance list recently, but that's about all they did.
Yep.
Anyway, those were just a few highlights of some of the sessions I attended.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for going, girls.
All right, now we are moving on to the action items. The first one is the second reading of Board Policy 443.5.
You'll see the first version of the policy up on the screen, a lot of red, which notes what's been taken out or added to this policy. We looked at this last month. And then the other version, which has less red and has the updated version. A couple of the highlights, again, the notion of the state law in regards to bathrooms and restrooms. A couple of word changes. We're looking at deferring to building level policies because it looks different developmentally at each of the buildings. There was some really outmoded language here in this policy, as we covered last month. Nothing's been changed from last month to this month. It's the same thing, except with less red, as you'll see in the other one. So if you can go to the other one, there's the newest, latest and greatest version of cell phone policy in the school district of Amery.
Okay, I have some questions about that.
Okay.
Okay. So the first reading that we had last month versus this reading this month,
Mm-hmm.
I think the probably changes were made from discussion that we had then, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's cleaned up more, a little bit more as regards to the high school. I think that's the only other thing.
The
that it
big
changed.
change was, the notice in the original policy, it kept citing the school district of Amery policy is, well, if we're quoting in the school district of Amery policy that it's going to be, in essence, handled at each building, you shouldn't refer back to the policy that says it's being handled in each building. So I omitted that language, that it's from that policy. I just stated it. Students are permitted. I just started it off that way. This version of the cell phone policy that you'll see up there, the newest version, the high school portion, is a freshly revised policy of, heck, that's less than a month old. The middle school version is the same as it's been for the longest time, and the elementary and intermediates are the same as well.
So the consequences are spelled out in the high school portion of it.
Okay?
There is no consequences listed in the middle school. I've also heard feedback of that the middle school and the high school policy should be the same.
Okay.
Mr. Benson, you came at a great time. What do you feel about having them the same?
Well, the only answer I would have on that is I'm not sure why that would have to be that way, but I'm not real excited about allowing our students to use phones at all during the day. And our policy basically says that, they have to have them off when school starts, and they can have them back when school's over. they need to call home because of basketball practice or where, right now, I just am concerned about the age of the kids and the responsibility that they may or may not show using that in the hallways. And I think I would speak from 98% of my staff would agree that they wouldn't want to see that happen.
So the different, I'm sorry, Chelsea, the difference that we have in the middle school policy versus the high school policy is the high school, basically, it blatantly says in here that it's not in a pocket, not sitting on your lap, basically not on your physical body of the student.
Yep.
The middle school just says you're responsible for keeping them turned off and out of sight, which means they could be in a pocket, they could be in their backpack, they could be somewhere
Right.
on their physical person.
They just have to be off and out. They're not allowed to use them, so if they bring them out. But it basically means I'm not going to go and, if they have them in their pocket, I'm not going to search them for them. But, and some of there are kids that are really concerned about putting anything into a locker because they're concerned about, is it going to be taken or whatever. I think, and I have to look at the high school policy, and maybe Josh can answer that, because I think yours right now is primarily tied to while they're in class.
Right, because the
So
biggest
that-
difference is that students are permitted to access their cell phones during breaks and during their scheduled lunch
Yeah.
versus at the middle school.
Yep, I realize that. So, but that's what I'm saying. So they're allowed to access them at the high school. They're not
Yeah.
allowed to access them at the middle school, but they're
Right.
allowed to actually carry them on them at the middle school. They're supposed to be off. I understand
Yeah.
that, but that is, so the confusion comes from, we've got 8th graders then going up to the high school, and then they're used to having them in their pocket or whatever. Now we're going to the high school and saying they're not supposed to be on your physical body. So
Well,
now you can break a habit.
My guess is they probably are.
I'm sure they are. So that brings me to my other question is who is enforcing this? Are we enforcing this? Is how much of it is getting enforced? Are we?
That's what I was going to say. How come the high school has violation?
Yes.
But middle and lean
Or none?
They don't. I mean,
Yeah.
shouldn't the violations be for
All of
all the schools? I mean,
Well, we certainly have violations. If they have their phone off, we take it away, and then I give it back to them at the end of the day. And then if it continues to be a problem, then we'll contact parents and say, no, you need to come and pick the phone up.
One of your directives, based on your conversation, is to put the violations as they exist in there. That's easy enough to do. We would
Yeah.
simply bring it back in March.
Right.
It doesn't have to be done today.
Right. I just think I don't know.
And if we want to mirror the middle school and high school policy more closely, we would simply need to decide tonight as to what that would look like so we can author it in the right way.
Right.
So
I'm
you
just-
simply
yeah,
have
I'm
to
not
give us that
comfortable.
guidance.
and then I have another
Still.
comment about consistency here. Like for high school, is the school day is defined as 7:55 a.m. to 3:12 p.m. But the middle school and intermediate and lean all define school day differently, which includes the full period of time between the beginning of the day and the end of the day. So
Yeah.
I think they should be consistent in defining school day. I know y'all start at different times and end at different times, but I mean,
Policy needs to
just-
be written in a broad enough way where it encompasses what you're talking about. So perhaps
Yeah.
beginning of the day and the end of the day is easier than the physical times, because the
Right,
physical
correct.
times won't be the same,
Right,
because they do
might
start
change.
differently
They can
each
change
every
next
building.
year. They can
Yeah.
change if we have to.
if we
Sure.
have to add minutes
Sure.
at the end of the school
Sure.
year,
That's an
The
easy
This
fix.
year,
The concern I would have is having a policy that's enforceable, and
Right.
I wasn't aware that the high school had written that, but there's no way I'm going to be able to police whether or not they have a phone in their pocket. If it's off and it's not being used, that's fine by me, because and if they bring it out, my staff sees it, and we enforce it very diligently.
Okay, and so I think that's the conversation that we need to have. So you're okay with it, and I get that every principal has what this policy says is that every principal is allowed to have their own
Yeah.
way that they do that.
But please know, it's not just principal, it's through committee action that
Right.
these policies have been drafted. It wasn't just Josh, it's a committee of folks that are looking at this.
Yeah,
at
okay,
each
well
of
then the
those levels.
policy does say though, each principal is responsible, so.
That's their job, in essence.
And
yes.
I get there's going to be different punishments for different schools. I mean, you're not going to have the same punishment for somebody in second grade if they even have a cell phone versus a, senior,
And-
if they use it in the bathroom.
Right.
But it should be a little bit more consistent with regard to violations and definitions.
Right. And so how do we track the violations? So let's say I'm in Mrs. Coleman's room and I get my phone taken away today, but then 2 weeks later I'm in I'm in Mr. Schieffer's room and I get my phone. So is that being tracked
Yep,
to the central somewhere?
It's sent into myself and Mr. Fern by the teachers, and then about once a week, Mr. Fern sends out a spreadsheet update that has where everybody stands on the violation, so they know where they are. The last month has been amazing for us. A lot of learning been going on at the high school in the last month.
Is it per year, or is there a time when it starts over for the violations, or a semester, a year? I mean,
Well, I would consider it a school year.
okay.
Yeah.
Ours go into the Power School system. So they'll write a technology violation, and it will go in. We have a technology violation for cell phones, or there's another one, a separate one for using your school-issued computer in an inappropriate way. Those would get entered in, and then we would be able to track them that way.
So you don't have consequences in the middle school to say,
Oh, certainly, sure we do. But it's
first, second, third, and then we're taking it away.
if it's the first time, we will take it away and give it back to them. If it's a continued problem, then I would usually say, no, I need to have your parent come and pick it up. But I don't hold it for beyond that. The parents usually have made it pretty adamant that they want that phone back. It's not my property, is what they're telling me.
So the two changes that I've heard you speak to so far, members of the board, are to more broadly define the times. That's easy. Then to spell out the violations, what are the consequences for them? That's also easy. Again, the question that we need to get at, though, to make reference to your original statement, Char, would be how do we better mirror the high school and middle school policies? Because we want to come back with a policy that you're able to vote on in March.
Yes.
The consequences we have is, we'll take the phone away, but see, that it's going to depend on how often have I seen that kid. Because ultimately what the kid is doing is for the lack of a better word, showing noncompliance. But they might be noncompliant 4 other ways during that period. And so the consequence is going to be, hey, you know what? I've told you not to have your phone. I told you to not be here. I told you to do this. And you continually are breaking those rules. So the consequence may be different for a kid depending on how much I've seen them. So ours typically says if you have this phone, this is a violation. It goes into our discipline policy. And there's spelled out steps based on how many times I've seen you and for what I've seen you for.
Right, but that's kind of all encompassing. What
Yeah.
we're just really talking about is cell phone policy.
Right.
Here,
But my point is that my discipline steps are dependent on what other types of things that kid has done just the cell phone and how we would respond to it.
So the question stands, how do you want us to better mirror those two policies? We're waiting for your directive on that so we can author this in a way that satisfies that.
How is it going with, do you feel like it's enforceable to say they're not allowed to, it's not allowed to be in their pocket?
Brian, would you mind coming up to the microphone right now?
Well, then we wandered into this water with our technology policy
Yep.
too. And we started to funnel it down, and to me, that wasn't working the best. And from the feedback I got from you folks is to broaden it back and let you guys decide, and the classroom teachers and the support staff do the policing in their manner. And then if it doesn't work there, then it starts to come up the ladder.
There's a lot of different policies of what will allow students to do and not to do. Very few of those policies have specific disciplinary measures are going to come if you do this. This is what's going to happen, because that paints you into a box. Because there are kids that handle and break various policies at all given times. And so I don't want to say, oh, well, it says right here, this is what I'm going to get. No, well, that's the concern I would have.
Yeah.
And to me, I would prefer that we would say, hey, we don't allow cell phones. And if you do, do this, then there's going to be a school consequence. But I don't know if I'm really a fan of spelling them all out. But
And high school kids and middle school kids are very much different.
Right.
Just as middle school and intermediate school are different as well.
Right.
Well, to add to the pocket thing, a high school student who has it in their pocket is going to have the vibrate on. And as soon as that phone vibrates, you've lost them.
Yep.
They may not check it, but they know they've got information there, and they're no different than all of us. When that phone vibrates or rings, it distracts us. So that's why the high school decided that we didn't want them in their pocket. Now, like Tom said, we can't enforce that all the time. Personal experience, I see it hanging out of a pocket. I ask the student, remind the student where it's supposed to be, and typically they, oh yeah, I forgot. I know they didn't forget. They know I know they didn't forget, but they put it in their back pocket and we move on. I guess what I would be concerned about is, and I understand the consistency part from you guys, but being in the classroom, let us be a part of that conversation and what this policy looks like.
Well, that's what I'm asking. If an 8th grader student had it on them in their pocket all this time in the middle school and it was fine, and then all of a sudden now we're asking them to come into the high school, and now
There's a lot of changes they have to get used to when they transition between any building.
Yeah.
Like in the high school, are they carrying backpacks around more than
Yes.
they are in the middle school?
Well, I don't know about that, but.
We don't allow them to carry backpacks around in the middle school. They have to put their stuff in the locker. But they're very hesitant about that because their lockers aren't, you're able to open the lockers if you really try. And the kids don't want to put them in there because they're worried about the safety of anyone taking their
they don't
stuff.
lock their lockers anyway because they
No.
all
Right.
jam them open anyway.
You're right.
So it's, yeah.
They jam them open and they don't want to use it, and we're all over it, but it's just impossible to enforce because if you go down there, you could open up majority of those lockers. And and they won't put them in there because they're worried that someone will take their stuff. You know, if they get their phone taken away, they're pretty upset about it. They don't like it. And then if I call their parents, you know, if I see them again, the parents don't like it. I make the parent come and pick it up. Very seldom do they, you know, they may forget to take their homework home, but they will not leave that school without that phone. They know where it is. You know,
Most at the high school have some sort of phone caddy in the room as well, so I think most of us, it's pretty consistent now, is you have the choice whether it's in your backpack or in the phone caddy when you walk into class. And if you're caught with it or you're trying to use it, and then from that point forward, when you walk into class, it goes in the phone caddy because you can no longer be trusted with that choice. Sits up front, they can see it, and they can grab it at the end of the hour.
Are there any times, like during the school day, that they're not using them for anything like educational in a classroom or whatever? You guys give them the free time and say it's okay. You guys can take out your phones. You can do whatever. Does that happen?
No, I don't think so. Not since we've gone to this policy. No,
The only time I would say where it is during warrior time. It's
Yeah.
been an arrangement for some teachers where a student can prove that they've got their homework done, their grades are at such a level, it's kind of like a little reward incentive.
if we get done with a minute left in class and they're getting up and announcements are coming on, they'll say, can we grab our phones? And typically at that point, as we're getting ready to head out the door, yeah, go ahead. And then they can catch up on everything they've missed in the last 85 minutes in their life. It's a big deal.
But
Right.
but you know, and I'm not saying the high school should or shouldn't have them during break because your kids are different. I know that my kids could not handle it, and that's all they do. I guess I take the stance that I want them to sit and talk to each other. I want them to interact without that technology all the time. And if you watch them before school, you see 75% of them like this, and they're not even making any eye contact. And to me, that's just not real productive. And so I'm at the stance to say I don't want it on during the day. And I would say that majority of the parents would agree with me. You know, they're saying, you know what, move on. But they're not at work. They don't have a boss that says, can you work today? Sporting things as much after school that are adjusting. They're a different age. Just like we don't allow ours to drive cars, and you can drive car, later. So to me, I don't have a problem with it not being exact. Whether or not we want to spell out the consequences in it, I just worry of that because I just worry about the policy painting me into a corner on what I'm going to do because I maybe if you had 17 things that happened wrong in the last week and now the phone is one more thing, maybe there's going to be a stiffer consequence. I don't know, because to me it's about pressing boundaries and not always,
So one of my questions though is that it says the cell phone use procedure shall be made clear to students at the beginning of each school year. So if each building is making that clear, and again, probably especially at the middle school and high school, how is that policy being made clear? I mean, I guess again, do you try to spell out consequences for students, or do you? I mean, obviously you say they're not allowed.
Yeah.
They need to be out of sight and off, but are you spelling out consequences to the students, or are you just saying that's the rule and you'll see what you get if you?
We are at the high school.
Yeah.
Read it to them word for word, steps, policy. I could hear the groans from every classroom while sitting in my office.
I mean, we have it in our handbook. I don't specifically lay out the specific policy, the steps that we'll take, but.
No, I did spend 13 years at the high school, and I did see a couple of cell phone violations in that time.
Really?
And yes, really. I can say with certainty that during the school hours, the number one trafficker of sending messages to our students in the high school has typically been their parents. And that is also something that we have to implore our parents to do less messaging during the day, because kids do feel compelled to answer those messages. And when they don't, more messages come. And when they don't answer those, more messages come. So that's a little difficult for us. So,
I can't believe it. My kids don't ever text me back, but I. Yeah,
It's
not their mom.
it's tough, but there are a lot of messages that are coming in from parents. It's tough. It is.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just look and think that I would want something I could enforce, and I can't enforce if they have it on them. I mean, unless it buzzes, but we'd be running all over the place, and
What I will do is I will work with the administrative team to tweak this based on your suggestion. I will send it to you well in advance of March, so you certainly could weigh in with your thoughts, and we'll be closer to where we need to be in March than we are right now. And if it takes us until April, that's fine too. We'll get her done eventually.
I'm more
Again-
comfortable, I'm more comfortable with it being more broad and loose and let
Most policy
these
is.
people and the staff deal with it on their level. And like Tom says, if you got an issue with a good kid that just did something, it's an easy one to call. If you've had a repeat customer, well, then you want to take and make a point. And if you start to build the parameter of this, it ends up being, God forbid, zero tolerance again.
Yeah.
Where that didn't work well.
right. I would just assume I would prefer that we set up that this isn't this isn't allowed, and then there's we say a lot of different things. You have to be in school, you have to be on time to class, but I don't spell out the consequences in every single one of those expectations. But there is a general attendance or discipline policy that spells that out. If you fall into those ranges, it's coming, but that's covering all the different things that they could do.
The other one that we talked about was the school district of Amery shall allow students to possess and use cell phones during the school day on school.
Yep.
I don't think we should say they shall allow them to use them during the day, and then we say, no, not really.
Okay, fair enough. Duly noted.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, the next action item is the technology purchase by Clint Walling.
Since that was an action item, do we have to
Yeah,
have an
we have
action
to-
on that?
Oh,
So I
motion to.
I'll motion to table this until I move to table this until the March meeting.
Is there a second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the second reading is on cell phone policy is tabled until next month. Now, moving on to technology purchase.
Over the course of the last 3 to 4 months, we've had several building and district technology meetings, and we've been discussing the student and staff device purchase for the next rotation. And we've all come to an agreement for students, we are going to recommend to the board here probably in 2 months, Chromebooks. With the purchase of Chromebooks, you need to purchase a Google device management license, they call it. And that allows us as IT to manage those Chromebooks from the Google admin. We would need roughly 1,200 licenses to manage the Chromebooks for grades 3 through 12. Google currently, their suggested retail price is $30 per device. After March 9th, that price will go up $8, so their suggested retail price is $39. Yeah, $38, I'm sorry, $8. So I talked to the vendors we work with, and I asked for some volume pricing on 1,200 licenses, and there's the 4 vendors we got prices back from, and with your approval tonight, I would like to recommend we go with Heartland Business Systems with $25 per license at a 1,200 license count, so it'd be about $30,000. If we make this purchase now, we're going to be saving about $9,600. And if we don't, and if we do it in 2 months, when I come back to ask for the Chromebook approval, it'll be costing us $9,600 more.
And as a refresher, Heartland Business Systems is the same group we're working with on our facilities upgrade, our safety and security, PAs, clocks, entryways, that's Heartland Business Systems
we
as
already
well.
have
We already
I
have a
work with them quite
relationship
a
with
bit,
them,
yep.
yes.
I work with all 4 vendors quite a bit. I'd love to go to Connecting Point, but that's a pretty good chunk of change. And he couldn't compete with the volume that these companies compete with, that's why his price is a little higher.
So the Chromebooks, are we planning on leasing those, or are we planning on buying them?
They'd be the plan is to do a lease at a dollar buyout, so we would actually own them at the end of the lease. The ones we currently have are retail value, so we gotta send them back.
And those are the laptops you're talking
Yeah.
about?
The Dell?
Yeah.
So you're asking us to
The
go
cart-
ahead and get the lease
The
first?
cart,
for
well, the licensing.
The licensing
The
before
cart
we
before the
ever
horse.
vote on leasing Chromebooks?
The cart before the horse. I'm trying to save $10,000.
To try and save 96.
I
Yeah,
understand
that's
that.
money.
I mean, I totally get that, but then, I mean, that puts the board in a very awkward position to even think about voting on something in 2 months to come back and leasing Chromebooks when you're locked in. I mean, then, because you've already purchased licensing to
Well, the
them.
reason I'm bringing it to you tonight is because committees, all the committees have talked, and our recommendation as committees is gonna be Chromebooks for students. Not staff, we're still working on the staff thing, but the students' recommendation is gonna be Chromebooks.
And I have some questions about equipping students with the Chromebooks versus our laptops. So in those areas where we have to go back to labs, like as far as in tech ed, business ed, some of our art classes, those things, and so they're going to have laptops in there anyway to dock into and do that kind of work, because the Chromebooks aren't going to be able to do that kind of work. Is that correct?
Yep, there'll be, right now, we're looking at about 4 labs at the high school. And we'll be working with scheduling at the high school so we can alternate the classes at the terms, so we can have a mobile lab for, let's say, tech ed. And then the next term or next semester would be art. So that lab can go over there while they're building the house. We'd be playing the game with scheduling. There'd be a lab for, a desktop lab for business ed, or desktop publishing, Mike Rose's class, the Word and Excel and all that. And then Sherry Lee's keyboard lab would be an open lab that classes could check out in that lab. Middle school would be a keyboard lab and tech ed, and then the intermediate school wouldn't need a lab.
So how does that work for kids that have homework?
Well, they'd be able to check them labs out, or the laptops.
So they would be responsible for a Chromebook and a laptop.
Ideally, my idea would be no homework, going home with the laptop. Ideally. But now you gotta remember, we can do a lot of the work that they do on the Chromebook through the cloud. A lot of it can be done. The specialty software like Photoshop cannot, but a lot of your Word programs, all that stuff can be done online, a lot of it that they need to do.
And I
There's
understand
Office
your
365.
concern about entering into a license agreement. We haven't made a device purchase yet. Please remember, when you're thinking about a device purchase, that the price point difference between a laptop and a Chromebook is going to save us about $40,000 a year for
That
3
was my next
consecutive
question.
years.
Where's the cost savings on versus?
That's your cost savings.
And that's why I guess my question is that the recommendation that we have for going with the Chromebooks versus the laptops is the cost savings, or what is
My
the reason?
summary would be this: if we can do with a Chromebook that which we need to be done and save $40,000 a year, that's a heck of a good decision, and we can.
But
That's
are
the
we-
question, can
Are
we?
we spending 30 of it on licensing?
No, that when you're talking just devices, the price for purchasing is a whole different thing. If you did
So-
the licensing plus Dells, you're coming out $120,000
licensing.
behind.
Either one is going
Either
to
way,
be
there's
better.
Correct. The device will save you about $40,000 a year, but that's a decision you're going to make later. You're not making that tonight.
Well, actually, it's more than that.
More?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
It's about $200,000 difference, Chromebook, laptop, a year.
There you go.
Each year.
It's a substantial amount of money, yeah.
But if we had the laptops, would we still have Google Chrome licenses
The-
that we would have to pay for? Because the way I read this, it says that we've agreed on Chromebooks for the next student device refresh.
If we go with Chromebooks, we have to get the Google, this license, if we go with
Yes.
Chromebooks. If we go with laptops, no.
Well, that was Aaron's question. That Andrew just
I thought
answered.
there's license, is there not license with that also or not?
There's some, but not $30,000 worth.
Well, that was Aaron's question. That was not accurate then, so we would.
I know there's license with both.
It's about 10,000. It's not 30
And this is a one-time purchase.
per device. So if your device lasts 4 years, in 4 years we'd do it again. It runs with the device, and once the device is dead, the license.
If we swap out, if we end up with having Chromebooks that we have to swap out, like we had some laptops that we had to swap out because they're not working, do we have to relicense those devices?
Yeah, the 1,200 is 100 extra Chromebooks for 3 through 12, so we'd have 100 extra ones. Now granted, that might not be enough, but I don't know where the enrollment's gonna be right now. I don't have the crystal ball, I wish I did, but I'm getting a rough number with 100 extra for 3 through 12.
And why do we do grade 3 through 12? I mean,
Because we'll be coming on, in not next year, but the following year, we're gonna do in intermediate school as well.
and they will all have a Chromebook.
That's the suggestion, yes. That's what we're suggesting.
Again, we have not decided that.
I just look
Ooh,
at
I
the
don't
money we
know.
can
I
save
just-
in the committees, we're all on the same page, and that's why I wanted to bring it to you, 'cause it's a
If
good
you
chunk
feel
of
that way, then I
savings.
think your best course of action is to table this, but please know when you table this, you lose that 9,600 for sure. That's the drawback of tabling until March. But that's a decision that's up to you guys.
And this just happened 2 weeks ago. Never, just 2 weeks ago, they announced this.
I know that we have had a lot of staff trying and looking at what would they use it for their students, for the students taking a look at them. But as far as the teacher committees, it was kind of unanimous that we would move towards Chromebooks, that we would suggest to the board Chromebooks because of the gigantic $200,000 savings. And that majority of the student programs, primarily because they're web-based now, that computer would be ample for a majority of what we do. And even if we had to have the other labs, the cost was so exorbitantly different, $200,000, so that was the direction where the technology committee was going to come forward and suggest that we move that direction.
So I guess my question is, we should have had the technology committee here and have this suggestion, recommendation maybe
Well,
already.
Clint is the IT director.
Committee never heard about this. It just happened. I mean, these guys, it's new with these guys. It just happened 2 weeks ago, and the last meeting we had was 3 weeks ago, I think.
So I guess I'm hearing contradicting numbers. So Sean's saying around the.
It's $200,000 a year
So it's $200,000 a year that we're saving going on Chromebooks.
versus Dell laptops.
Okay.
A year or per purchase of the
A
Chromebook?
year.
A year.
A year.
It's
So you're not
substantial.
making that decision here this evening. The decision you're making here this evening is whether to enter into Chromebooks for kids licensing. And the difference there is 30,000 versus 10.
You're kind of making that decision. If we're spending this kind of money on licenses, you're kind of making that decision.
Yep.
And I guess that's the problem I have, but
Then I would encourage you to table this until March.
I wouldn't, I mean, I don't want to do that to miss out on the $9,600 if we're gonna end up doing that anyway. I'm just saying it's a moot point to go back and vote on it again.
We would still vote. You're still purchasing devices. But yes, you are making that decision here this evening.
It's
But
basically asking us to make
But
a decision.
unfortunately, we didn't set the timeline. Google did.
Yeah, I would have waited till March or April, but I can't.
It's not our
March
choice.
9th. And I don't know why they didn't give districts a lot more time. They know how we work. The purchasing doesn't happen this time of the year.
Right. I mean, logically, it makes sense. What I'm saying is,
I understand where you're at.
parliamentary procedure-wise, it doesn't make sense to me. And you're basically asking us to make two decisions with one decision, but
That
it
is
looks
correct,
like we're
but
gonna have to.
but we didn't choose that timeline, unfortunately. But it is the reality. But please know that committees have met, middle and high school, numerous times. Josh is the technology chairperson, and that recommendation is being made to you here this evening through Clint, that we are going to go with Chromebooks 312. That decision has been unanimously agreed upon. So if you think by purchasing license you're locking us in on a decision that's not wanted, it is wanted. Those committees have wanted that, and they think that's the best move. So it's not against their wishes by any means.
I don't
So
think we're
my-
gonna get a total picture here
I guess-
of the savings, but
I don't think it should be tabled until the next March board meeting, but I'd be willing to, if you feel you want more information, to have a special board meeting just on this issue sometime before March 9th. I mean, that's what, 3 weeks away?
Yeah.
I mean, it's 3 weeks.
I don't
the
think it's
decision
gonna
needs
change
to-
the
It's not gonna
culture,
change
the
it,
idea.
no.
Okay.
I don't see that it changes it, I want it aware that if we're doing this, I mean,
anything
for everybody needs to be
technology-wise-
aware that if we're doing this tonight, it's really gonna be a moot point whether we do the Chromebooks or not, so
We do
you're
it-
locked in.
We do have a district technology meeting on the 25th. So I mean, I don't know.
But it is a moot point, because anything we buy right now is outdated next week.
True.
I mean, that's
Okay.
reality.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, and if you need more than 1,200, it's gonna be another, what, $30 a license
It'll
at
be-
that point.
It'll go up to $9 per,
It'll go up $8.
$8.
So-
If we need like,
$38.
if we need more
We
than
go over
100,
100.
if we need another 20, then it'd be
Yeah.
$38.
But
Yeah,
remember,
probably 35, $36.
remember,
Just paying us
again,
all.
that the moot point isn't about a decision that's not wanted. It's a decision that both technology committees, your technology committee chairperson, the district administrator, and your IT director all think is the best course of action for the district. So it's not something we're locking in. It's a bad deal. It's a good deal, financially and academically. So to be locked in on something that's a good deal, I don't think is really a thing that holds you back at all.
Well, I move we purchase the Google Chrome.
I'll second. Anyone, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, your purchase is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just had to make you sweat a little bit.
All right, the next action item is the band trip 2020.
Meredith Engion is here to talk about Band Trip 2020. I will preface her remarks by stating this is going to be less is more, and here's why I say that. Because March 9th, there is a big reveal for the band participants and their parents as to where the travel destination will be. So please know that Meredith does have all sorts of things to say in life, but just not here this evening. So she's going to say less rather than more. You're up, Meredith.
Okay, I'm literally going to read what's on here. Our dates of travel will be December 28th this year to January 1st of 2021. We are using Bob Rogers as our travel company. And who is attending is the band and color guard at the high school next year. We're hoping for one chaperone for every 8 members, which is approximately 10 to 12 chaperones. Me, the director, and my fiance, Brent Lundgren. And if you would like more information about locations, itineraries, payments, you can join us for our meeting on March 9th at the high school auditorium, 6 p.m. And I'm asking today for approval because we need
approval.
For school trips.
And please know, members of the public, the board does know where we're going. They didn't vote on some destination that's unknown. We're going to Rice Lake. No, just kidding. They know, but we want to make sure the big reveal stays intact for March 9th.
Not a problem.
I move we approve the band trip 2020.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun in Rice Lake.
Leave before you blow it.
We did practice.
I know. Yes, we did.
So the Rice Lake Mall and the Rice Lake Holiday Parade.
And we won't even stay overnight.
Extravaganza
Travel to and from every
Hallelujah.
day. It's perfect.
Fundraising will be short and sweet.
It's awesome.
The Amery Lights Parade. Okay, the last item is personnel.
Well, we have resignations in Clubhouse, a resignation in Clubhouse from Jessica Luke in 8th grade volleyball, Kate Weisenbeck. So if anyone here in the room is interested in an 8th grade volleyball position, we will be taking applications.
Is that spring or fall?
Volleyball's in the fall. Are you interested?
She sounded. I heard
You're the only one to have asked a question.
Volleyball. I just heard about volleyball starting. Does that booster volleyball that's going on or starting?
That must be.
Booster. Okay.
You
Okay.
don't
Just
need
heard
any
volleyball
previous
starting, so I was
skill
wondering if
or
this was a hurry,
expertise.
like,
You could
hurry up
still
thing
do
or
it.
not.
You don't need any background in this sport.
Thank you.
And we have a new employee. This isn't really a new employee. They're just picking up clubhouse worker as one of their already assigned duties. So they're not new to the district. They're already in the district. They're just doing two things rather than one.
Is that specifically after school then? Because she's busy those days, right?
It's clubhouse, which is inherently after school because their daytime job would be in the way otherwise. So good question.
Motion to approve the personnel action for February.
For a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the personnel action is approved, and there is no reason to go back into closed session, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second? Roll call, Aaron?
Yes.
Shar?
Yes.
Keith?
Yep.
All right.